I pledge allegiance to the flag of the New York Yankees, Jets, and Knicks, to the franchise which it stands, one city, under Derek Jeter, indivisible, with the New York Liberty and David Justice for all. I don't know how you guys start watching your games, but I begin with my version of the Pledge of Allegiance. Can't have it any other way. But seriously, what makes you a fan of your team? Why are you even a fan of your team? Does it matter about the city you grew up in, the city you currently live in, the city you wish to live in, or do you like your team because of your favorite player? There's a lot of Bulls fans from the 90s who are nowhere to be found. I mean, can I blame them? Minus the successful but shorter on a championship era of Derrick Rose, what was post-Jordan Bulls fans supposed to do? What were they supposed to be proud of? Eddie Curry? Tyrese Thomas? Bobby Portis's jab? Does recent failure mean you abandon your squad because your favorite player retires and plays for the Wizards 3 years later? Who knows? Who even makes these rules up? In this feature, I will examine what makes a fan truly a fan of a team, city, and/or player. Also, I will examine whether you can actually root for more than one team in the same league, division, or city. I mean, can you really root for the Mets and the Yankees? With that being said, this is a Nacirema featured article. I pledge allegiance to my team, or city, or player. I pledge allegiance to my team by the Nacirema. I have a good friend, I would say almost like a brother. We'll call him E for the purposes of this article. My boy E is as passionate and knowledgeable a sports fan as you would ever meet. Well, second to me, of course. E is knowledgeable about everything from the mainstream leagues of the NBA and NFL to European football to lesser followed leagues like minor league baseball and the WNBA. He is a true connoisseur of sports. Parentheses. Again, second to me. Smile. We have the most passionate debates, spirited banter, and fun conversations surrounding the world of sports. It is something to witness as we are a walking, talking, breathing carbon copy of Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon of the acclaimed TV show, quote, pardon the interruption, end quote. I hope one day to bring a show of ours to the world. No matter how passionate the debate or how long E self-hibernates in the halls of his local library to try and one-up me on sports facts, he is and will always be a close friend of mine. No debate will ruin this sure to be a lifelong friendship. However, one thing that boils me to the core about my good friend is his allegiance to his favorite sports teams, his never-ending attachment to any team that plays or has the name New York in its title. Open parentheses. Yes, there are teams that have New York in its title, but don't actually play in the city and state. More on this later. Close parentheses. It's comical and befuddling. E roots for the well-known teams like the New York Football Giants down to the lesser-known teams of the Binghamton University Bearcats. Open parentheses. Shout out to Kornheiser. Close parentheses. He also roots for the Columbia University Lions, the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Mets, and the Buffalo Sabres. On any given day, you will find E rooting for and checking the stats of the G League, Long Island Nets, and the Yankees' high minor league affiliate, the Hudson Valley Renegades. Now you may say to yourself, quote, what's wrong with rooting for multiple teams, end quote. To me, there's absolutely nothing wrong at all with loving multiple teams in multiple sports, even if it means rooting for the New York Riptide in the National Lacrosse League. There's just one problem. The Riptide compete against the Albany Firewolves, the Rochester Nighthawks, and the Buffalo Bandits. They are in the same league. Additionally, E's New York Giants compete in the same league as the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills, who actually compete in the same division as the Jets. Do you see where the problem lies? E is committing what I believe to be the cardinal sin of any sports fan. He is rooting for more than one team at the same time. He is effectively hedging his proverbial bets on two teams that will compete against each other and some might even compete in a championship game or series like the Giants and Jets or the Yankees and Mets. Open parentheses. See the 2000 World Series. Close parentheses. Ask him on any given day, who would you root for if the Giants played the Jets? And his answer has not changed for over 20 years. Quote, I'm rooting for New York. End quote. When I say it boils my blood to hear this, I mean it raises my endorphins to heights not seen by man. There is no way a fan can root for two teams in the same sport, let alone in the same city. It just isn't mathematically, spiritually, economically, or humanly possible. Green Bay Packers fans are not Dallas Cowboys fans. Los Angeles Lakers fans aren't Boston Celtics fans. Jets fans aren't Giants fans unless your name is E. He states he must root for any team that plays in New York State. But one day I stumped him because it just so happens that the aptly named New York Giants and Jets don't even play or are headquartered in New York State. They haven't played a quote home end quote game in New York State since 1975 and 1983 respectively. They have played and are headquartered in the state of New Jersey since then and only play in New York State when they play the Buffalo Bills. The Jets compete against the Bills twice a year, and the Giants only play the Bills once every 4 years unless it's in the Super Bowl. Open parentheses, doesn't look like that's happening for the Giants anytime soon, although Buffalo was one game away last year, close parentheses. E still has no answer on how he can root for a team, open parentheses, or teams, close parentheses, that plays in New Jersey. The only plausible answer is that they have New York in their team names, open parentheses. Come on, E, close parentheses. Nevertheless, how can anyone who thinks they can compete with the sports master Ola himself even possibly think they can root for 2, 3, or in the lacrosse league's case, 4 teams in the same league? Let's not even get started on college teams, as there are dozens of colleges in New York State. That's a conundrum no sports fan should or probably could explain. Here's another question for E that I never asked him. Can he root for the minor league affiliates of baseball or hockey teams that are affiliated with New York teams like the Yankees and Rangers, but don't actually play in New York? Teams such as the Hartford Wolfpack and the Tampa Tarpons are minor league affiliates of the aforementioned teams, but they play outside of the state. Does E not root for them because they happen to not have Kathy Hochul as their governor? It's routine for a major league team like the Yankees to send a player down to a minor league team for development or an injury assignment. Does E stop rooting for a player who was on the major league roster playing in New York, but now on the minor league roster in Florida? Does E even root for players or just teams? If he roots for players, does he only root for players from New York, or can they be partially from New York like Carmelo Anthony and Michael Jordan, who moved out of New York at a very young age? Do they have to be from New York City like E is originally from? Or can they be from Long Island like his favorite quarterback, Vinny Testaverde, who is from the same Long Island town E moved to in his teenage years? Can he root for Rob Gronkowski, who is from Western New York State, but played against the Jets twice a year and lost to the Giants in Super Bowl 46? All these questions about E beg a bigger series of questions. When is it appropriate to jump ship to another team? What does it mean to be a fan of a player, and how does that relate to your team? Do regions matter as much as they do when determining an allegiance to a team because of the wide availability of watching any team in any sport in any city at any given time? What is the future of fans? Oh yeah, and one last one for E. Can you be a fan of more than one team in the same sport? What makes a fan of a team an actual fan, and how do you become a fan of said team? By all accounts, most people can spot a fan of a team from a distance away. How? They usually are wearing that team apparel for whatever reason, whether it's at a game or at work or just in public. People tend to wear or have something from their favorite team on display. Unless you were my parents, who grabbed the lowest priced apparel in the store no matter if we liked the team or not, open parentheses. I always hated that red Kansas City Chiefs snapback my father had, close parentheses. People love showing off their teams even in down years. But does that really make the person a fan? What do you have to do to show you are a fan? Is it just the apparel, or do you have to have some knowledge of the players and what's currently going on with the team? Do you have to know the Yankees' current standing in the American League East Division? This seems far-fetched, but I personally don't engage in conversations with fair-weathered fans because it's like me talking to a woman about the best concealer on the market. It is pointless unless I'm trying to learn something. I do dabble in conversation, but I know how analytic I can sometimes get, so I usually end the conversation quickly if I determine we aren't on the same level. It can be very awkward. Additionally, who really wants to talk to me about Julius Randle's true shooting percentage? But because I may be more knowledgeable about these things, does that make me a true fan? I'll answer that no. It just means I have way more time on my hands than I probably should, and these sorts of things interest me more. A true fan is one who roots for a team regardless of how rigorous they root for them. They show their pride in that team no matter the record, and they occasionally curse them out or throw things at the TV when things are going wrong. The last sentence may not always be the case, but a true fan has some spark and fire underneath their regular demeanor for their team. How does a fan of a team become a fan of a team? I liked, open parentheses, no loved, close parentheses, the Atlanta Braves growing up because my older brother liked them. Also, they were on TV a lot in the early 90s as only the most successful teams made the playoffs, and the Braves did that every year from 1991 to 2015. I knew the Braves lineup before I fully knew my times tables because I fell in love with that patented tomahawk chop. You couldn't tell me anything about Ryan Gant, David Justice, or Terry Pendleton. I was hooked until I wasn't. Open parentheses, more on that later. Close parentheses. I was a fan. I became one because of family affiliation. I did the same thing with the 49ers and Knicks. Whatever Big Bro liked, I liked. I did venture out and started to like a team, all because I didn't like the team that was playing in the same city that I liked. Open parentheses, confusing. I know. Shaking my head. Close parentheses. For example, I watched the Giants beat the Bills in Super Bowl 25 in 1991. I absolutely hated, open parentheses, still do, close parentheses, the Giants. I mostly hated them because of their style of play. They would run the ball so much. I was a fan of Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and the 49ers because of their West Coast offense. Plus, I think I hated the Giants because everybody liked them. I was a renegade like that. So when I found out that another team from New York played in the NFL and I had no previous knowledge of their existence, I jumped on it and never looked back. The Jets certainly don't have the Giants' success and haven't been to the Super Bowl in my lifetime. But when they do, it will be all the more sweeter. They are my team, and I picked them because I hated the Giants and they played in New York. Open parentheses, which they actually don't. See above, close parentheses. So as we can see, you may pick a team because of family affiliation, geographical ties, or share hatred for another team in the same city or league. How many Los Angeles Clippers fans were created from the hatred of the Lakers? I guess there are other ways to become a fan of a team, and please share them with me in the comments to this article or messages because it is an interesting subject. When is it appropriate to jump ship to another team? I am a New York Knickerbockers fan, open parentheses, commit me to the crazy house, close parentheses. I have been since I can remember my brother watching them in the 80s. This means I have nearly watched them hoist the Larry O'Brien NBA championship trophy and have watched the most dysfunctional franchise in recent sports memory all in one lifetime. Open parentheses. Who knows what the next lifetime will bring that franchise? Close parentheses. I have literally cried as a youngster as John Starks missed a game-winning three-pointer that was blocked by Houston Rockets great Hakeem Olajuwon, open parentheses, Nigerian, close parentheses, in Game 6 of the 1994 NBA Finals, open parentheses. I cried because I knew they weren't going to win Game 7, which they didn't, close parentheses. I have watched them come oh so close to a championship but each time getting stopped by Michael Jordan and the Bulls all throughout the 90s. But Patrick Ewing's Knicks always played tough defense as he was my favorite player, and I modeled my own game after him. I knew when I started playing ball that I could never be as skilled as Jordan. So I played like a big guy who could rebound and block shots. Open parentheses. It's much easier to jump and catch a ball than dribble through defenders and dunk when you are learning the game. Close parentheses. Those were great days, even though it ended with no championship. Then somewhere around college for me, it got really weird and the Knicks became the laughingstock of the league. I learned a lot over these years about the business of sports, and I learned quickly what having the wrong owner who hires the wrong people to run the team means for your squad. James, quote, I do one interview a year and that's for the MSG network, close quote. Dolan is the CEO of the Madison Square Garden Company, which owns the Knicks. The Knicks are a very profitable franchise because they play in the biggest city and the biggest media market in the country. They also play in the heart of Manhattan in a beautiful arena within a few miles of every affluent New Yorker. But that's where the good news stopped for a long time. The Knicks were total losers from the end of their playoff run in 2004 until very recently, open parentheses, with a brief surge in 2012 and 2013, close parentheses. When I say they were a dumpster fire of an NBA franchise, that is a total understatement. They were Ron Howard's brilliant 1991 film Backdraft. From a sexual harassment lawsuit to seemingly drafting the wrong players each and every year. Open parentheses. I still don't think they would have drafted Steph Curry if he fell one spot to us in 2009. Sorry, Donnie Walsh. It's not personal. Close parentheses. To hiring the wrong head coach year after year. To alienating arguably basketball's most famous fan in 2019, Spike Lee. Open parentheses. An elevator ride? Really? Close parentheses. To having one of their star players eat Vaseline on the internet. Open parentheses. I'll never unsee that video from Stephon Marbury. Close parentheses. To squandering the opportunities that came with insanity. Open parentheses. The Knicks were really in a dispute with cable operators in the middle of Jeremy Lin's great run that made fans miss some of those classic games. Close parentheses. To forcefully kicking a Knicks all-time great player out of the Garden. Open parentheses. Charles Oakley is a god to us. Close parentheses. The last 20 years have been forgettable for Knicks fans. No one, and I mean no one, could blame a Knicks fan for seeking refuge with another team. Or after watching Andres Bargnani play for us, not watching the NBA ever again. But is this what a fan of a team does? When the going gets tough, we hop on another franchise like we are a veteran player chasing a chip? Are we never supposed to lose? Isn't the satisfaction of rooting for a team, knowing that you stuck with them through the toughest of times, even if it meant watching Bargnani? Open parentheses. I'm never letting the Knicks get away with trading a first-round pick for that guy. Close parentheses. Put together YouTube lowlight reels? When is it appropriate to jump ship? I admit, I used to root for the Mets. They were cool and they had a bunch of black players. My favorite player, Darryl Strawberry, played for them, and they were successful, winning the 1986 World Series right before my very young eyes. You couldn't tell me anything about Darryl. Open parentheses. Love that chant. Close parentheses. I was a fan until November 8th, 1990. The unthinkable happened. The Mets let Darryl Strawberry sign with his hometown Dodgers. I was devastated. I was still under 10, but I knew I could never root for the Mets again. This was a perfect storm because this was when the Braves started their run. So I found my new team. I would eventually settle on the Yankees because my new favorite player, Derek Jeter, was playing for them. But was it right that I jumped ship after Darryl didn't play for the Mets anymore? Did I even really root for the Mets, or was it just Darryl? Who really knows if it's ever appropriate to stop rooting for a team and picking up another? Who is really keeping track of that anyway? The fan police? All I know is that it brings up our next question. What does it mean to be a fan of a player, and how does that relate to your team? Darryl was my favorite major leaguer as he was the first player I gravitated to because of his moonshot home runs, his race, and his swagger. It didn't hurt that you could turn on New York's WWOR TV and his games were on because I lived in the same city he played in. I now know that I like Darryl more than I like the Mets. The feeling of loving Darryl and the Mets went hand in hand until that fateful day he left in fall 1990. After he signed with the Dodgers, I really tried to like the Mets, but I didn't look at the team or the franchise the same. I couldn't understand as a preteen why they would let my favorite player go. Forget the fact that Darryl probably peaked and there were early signs that he was not a dependable player. Forget the fact that the Mets had a budget and would have to make decisions on several players who were on those very successful 80s teams. I wanted my player back. I didn't understand the business of sports, but I did expose myself very early to the loyalty of player or team or both. I hung around as a fan in the 1991 season until I didn't and left for the Braves. I rooted for Darryl, but I also wanted him to fail because he felt so far away, and in those days, teams out of your market were barely on TV unless it was the playoffs. This brings up another question. Does liking the player come before liking the team or vice versa? Now as a grown man, everyone that knows me knows I was a big Derek Jeter and currently a LeBron James fan. They are similar in their greatness and contribution to their respective sports, but both men couldn't be more different in the transactional nature their careers followed. Jeter was drafted by the team he loved growing up in the Yankees. He never reached free agency in his first time approaching it. He signed a 10-year extension in 2000 that took him into free agency in his latter years of playing. In the last contract negotiations he had with the Yankees, he was never a serious threat to sign anywhere else. So he finished his career with the team that drafted him. His decision to do that never threatened to test my loyalty to the Yankees because my favorite player played for my favorite team from start to end. During that time, I became an adult, open parentheses, on most days, close parentheses, and learned the business of sports. After learning how cutthroat front offices and owners can be, I would not have blamed Jeter for becoming a member of the Red Sox, open parentheses. Imagine Mr. November in that Red Sox uniform. Gross, close parentheses. I don't know if I could root for him again, but I thankfully never had to make that choice. Conversely, Mr. LeBron Romani James' career has been a blueprint for maximizing free agency and leveraging all your power as a superstar athlete to play in the best situation possible. All the while, keeping multiple fan bases at the edge of their seats, winning on multiple versions of, quote, the decision, end quote. LeBron was drafted by his, quote, hometown, end quote, team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, open parentheses. Akron is not exactly Cleveland, close parentheses. And immediately was a fitting end to a journey that was chronicled through his brilliant high school career in Ohio. LeBron was supposed to win a championship for a hapless franchise whose biggest highlight until he was drafted was a Michael Jordan straightaway jump shot over Craig Elo to lose a playoff series they were favored to win. To say the Cavs needed LeBron in 2003 was like saying the Oakland A's need a new stadium. Total understatement. It was a match made in heaven, until it wasn't. LeBron didn't win that elusive championship in his first stint with Cleveland. He took his talents to South Beach and headed to play for the Miami Heat in the summer of 2010. It resulted in a jersey-burning, profanity-filled escape that saw local sheriffs protect his home in Bath, Ohio. The question was now posed to millions of LeBron fans like myself. Would you stay a Cavs fan now that he was gone, or will you remain loyal to wanting that team to win? The answer was very easy for me, as I had no connection to Cleveland or the Cavaliers before he was drafted, and I had no desire to have a connection after he left. I left quicker than LeBron himself left the court after that Game 6 loss to the Celtics in the 2010 playoffs. I was a Heat fan for 4 years because of LeBron. I returned back to Cleveland with him in 2014, and I celebrated him winning a championship in that city in 2016. Then I left with him for Los Angeles in 2018, and I am currently a de facto Lakers fan. See how easy it was to jump ship? It always amazed me in the late 90s how all those Bulls fans suddenly disappeared when Jordan left the Bulls. Very few were rooting for Elton Brand and Fred Hoiberg like they were rooting for Jordan and Pippen just a few months before they won their sixth championship. But as an adult, I understand why they jumped ship. Some teams have fans that will stay through losing seasons, as the Chicago Cubs have had many great players come and go during their 108-year championship drought. The fans remain loyal to the, quote, lovable losers, end quote. I sometimes catch myself watching that final out in Cleveland in the 2016 World Series on YouTube because I still get goosebumps from knowing how much losing they had to endure. Does this make me a fan? No. It just gives me that connection to others who appreciate the struggle of a team they have rooted for years, regardless of who the players are. Additionally, I can relate to one of my favorite players in football, Darrelle Revis, when he won a Super Bowl for the team I most despise, the New England Patriots. So to all those basketball fans that hate the Lakers and hate LeBron, I'm telling you, it's okay to root for Carmelo Anthony this season. He has a very good shot at his first ring. Don't feel a way because it will help LeBron and the Lakers get a ring. It's about your favorite player, correct? Do regions matter as much as when determining an allegiance to a team because of the wide availability of watching any team in any sport in any city at any given time? It must be so hard for kids growing up nowadays. They have to make so many decisions. Which app do they use to order the food they can't afford? Which video game to spend endless hours playing? Then they have the enviable decision of which team to root for, as they have hundreds of sports channels at their disposal with any given team in any market they can watch with a click of a button. When I grew up, open parentheses, can't believe I'm saying this phrase, sad face, close parentheses, you can only watch games from teams in your market unless you had cable, open parentheses, which we didn't, close parentheses, and you probably saw a very popular team like the Bulls or Lakers on national TV once a week. You only heard about out-of-market players through word of mouth or in magazines or newspapers. You sat patiently and waited until the playoffs, and you did the same thing the next season and so on. Then sports media exploded. Now through the magic of cable bundling and cell phones, you can not only watch any team on any given night, but you have endless sports shows to analyze pre-game warm-ups and locker room quotes. Today, you can get your sports fix at any time of the day. I used to have to watch Tom McDonald on WNYW TV in New York City on the 10 o'clock news at exactly 10:52 p.m. That was if my mother let me stay up just to catch a glimpse of the Knicks highlight. I didn't know it at the time, but what this did was give me a lasting connection to my teams, as the only teams I could see were the local teams. I always thought it was funny when a friend of mine would like an out-of-market team, and I would think to myself, quote, but how do you watch Orlando Magic games while living in New York? Close quote. They probably like the Magic because of Penny Hardaway or Shaquille O'Neal. I would wonder how could they feel any connection to those teams if they couldn't regularly watch them even on cable. I also wondered, how do you root for a team that you couldn't go to their game and you have no connection to their city? Does region identification and connection matter when rooting for your team? Do you have to know about the north side of Chicago to root for the Cubs? Do you need to know about the South Bronx when rooting for the Yankees? Do you have to know that former Red Sox owner Tom Yawkey was one of the most racist owners ever? Open parentheses, I just had to sneak in something negative about the Sox. The point is that most people don't have any connection to the region their team plays in, other than they were born there or lived there. They have no connection to the team's history, stadium, and some have never been to a game. My mom is a Yankee fan because I'm a Yankee fan. She went to her first baseball game in her 60s, but she was right there with me cheering on the couch in 1996 when Yankees third baseman Charlie Hayes caught the final out for my team to capture their first World Series in my lifetime. We are New Yorkers, and that's our connection to our teams. Can I really blame someone who has every NBA game at their fingertips and lives in Racine, Wisconsin, but roots for the Golden State Warriors? Maybe they like Steph Curry. Maybe they went to Stanford. Maybe they were fans since Chris Cohen owned the franchise and almost ran it into the ground. Either way, they are fans, and who am I to say how their affiliation translates to them being a real fan? Unless they are my boy E. Which begs the final question: can you root for two teams in the same sport? I love calling E every year leading up to the annual Subway Series between the Mets and Yankees, or the two games the Bills and Jets play. I even relish in the fact that when St. John's University's basketball team plays St. Francis University or Long Island University, E can't definitively answer who he is rooting for. This cracks me up because he can't figure out the most basic question asked to any fan regardless of interest level in the sport. Who are you rooting for? Even if you like both teams, most fans will tell you they like one team more than the other. But not my perplexed friend. Even if the two teams are playing each other, can a true fan root for more than one team? If the present and future of sports gives fans access to multiple games at any given time, wouldn't it be fair to root for more than one team? We're rooting for the Lakers and Nets to meet in the 2022 NBA Finals, open parentheses, because you are a Carmelo and Nets fan, close parentheses. Be so bad? We know as fans in our heart of hearts that we might just be rooting for a great series and that whoever wins, you'll be happy. But conversely, the competition in us wants Melo to win one over the Nets, or we want the Nets to win for our city over the one career accomplishment that seems to elude Melo because we want to throw it in Knicks fans' faces. The Darwinian evolutionary theory, quote, survival of the fittest, close quote, may apply to reproduction in biology. But for us fans, bragging that we won a certain year's championship, even though we may not have been born when our team won said championship, is the ultimate bragging right in sports. Yankees fans will talk about their 27 championships, and most were only born for about 5 of them. But this is what it means to be a fan. Rooting and bragging for whatever team you select on that day, regardless if they play another team you selected on another day. I speak of my good friend E in the highest terms of endearment. He's a great guy with a sports-centric brain of the most passionate fan. After all you have learned about his allegiance to any team that plays in New York State, open parentheses, or Northern New Jersey, close parentheses, of all the non-committal answers he has when asked who does he root for when the Buffalo Sabres play the New York Islanders, you'd be surprised. That man is a Nebraska Cornhusker football fan. Go figure. This has been a Nacirema featured article. I pledge allegiance to my team. Please comment. Please send messages. Please be engaged. Power to the informed.